Hello and welcome to the Joyful Rebels podcast. We've got Claire and Donna Thomas here, your mother-daughter duo, and we are excited to announce, first of all, that this is episode 50, 50, of the Joyful Rebels podcast. That's an incredible accomplishment for us. I don't think there's any way a year ago, Mom, that we would have thought
Mm-mm,
we'd be coming up on 50 episodes.
mm-mm.
We're just shy of our 1 year anniversary. And the other cool and exciting thing is this anniversary aligns with another exciting event. Today's episode, we are interviewing Regina Smith, who is a super cool cat and a true joyful rebel. So, Mom, can you please introduce our guest for this week?
I am so over the top, over the moon on this. You guys that are watching on YouTube, you get a chance to get your eyes on her and see her. But I'm going to take the reins for her bio just because it's awesome. So Regina, you're on the camera, your face is there, and I don't know if this will be weird or not, but for you guys that are listening, I want you to stay plugged into this because it's rare that we have somebody that is really so unique and awesome, and we're going to continue to find these kinds of people to bring to you. But Regina is top of mind in my heart. And so I just want you to hear a tiny bit about her. So ears open, heart softened, and listen to where this cool cat's been. Uh, she has spent a lifetime dedicated to learning and teaching elevated leadership and launching conscious brands. Okay. She spent over 20 years with her skills straddled between entrepreneurship and corporate leadership, living and working throughout Europe and across the US before coming back to the North Shore of Long Island, which I love. And I loved the area. So I was at your old house, been to that area, and that felt like home to me too, just because you were there. As an insatiable student of skills and the science of leadership and dedicated to empowering others to apply their gifts to missions bigger than themselves, she has led up to 1,100 has had up to 1,100 yoga teachers in her care and has lectured and led retreats all over the world. Stop. So from there, so like you guys, I went to Bali and I went to Bali to go see Regina. And I don't know if there's anybody else on the planet that I would have done that with, for, to be inspired to. But when she talks about leading and being a part of leadership, there is a place in my heart that could not have been filled, energized, and moved forward unless I would have met her. So I want you to know that, and that's so interesting to me. I hope it is to you too. Let me finish off. That her corporate leadership experience includes time in management roles with Lululemon Athletica and as North American Director of Yoga with Lifetime Fitness, which is a 4 billion publicly traded company. Stop. And that's where I met her. And just so you know, there was a time when we were at a big corporate leadership meeting. So these big meetings that usually are kind of fun, also kind of filled with anxiety. I don't know, that's how I felt because it was just a lot. As an introvert, that was a lot of energy. There was a lot of people wanting to be seen and heard. That was my memory recollection of that as being part of the energy. And here we are in this giant conference room, giant, in a huge square, which again, as we talked pre-show, we're laughing because yeah, we were in a square. We're trying to get in this pointy, sharp thing. And out of all the leaders, and there must have been a good 50 people in the room at the time, somehow, I'm sitting next to Regina. And so if you're listening to this, look for the winks from the universe. When in your life, even the last couple of days or this season, has there been a wink? It wasn't on accident. And that, I can honestly say, changed the course of how I lead. And your times when you have mentors, remember, they don't have to have name tags on. They don't need to be older than you. They don't need to have 100% more experience, or they have to have a different perspective and a way of being in the world that speaks to you, that moves you in a way to want to do better. And Regina, you're that person for me, especially as a female. And that's an awesome thing. So I know that's probably super weird for you to sit there and say that. But then as we finish off and as we move into the present, then she's also launched 4 companies, you guys. This is somebody that's been and done many, many things, including Powered by Regina, Gritty Buddha, Karmic Grind, and 2.0, which I love that. I remember when you came up with that was just a new iteration and a beautiful play on words, each known for elevating local communities, bringing people together around movement, the arts, and coffee, providing human performance and well-being education on a global scale. That is no joke. Her executive coaching and leadership development roles included time at UC Berkeley with the Marcus Buckingham Company, since acquired by ADP, presenting at Summit Series on Powder Mountain, Wanderlust. She leads media conferences, and for the Hampton Inn Hotel brand, to name a few. Now, just to bring it home on a personal level, this is not somebody that's so driven and hurried that she hasn't created balance. She, in her downtime, and that is the thing, you're not hurried. Listen, as you're listening, know that. Here's somebody that's doing all that and also is a multi-time Tough Mudder finisher, practices yoga and meditation daily, and is a mom of 2 young girls, one of which is a unicorn, the other one's a mermaid. Oh my gosh, I don't know where they got that. And would travel for music anywhere on earth. She dreams in Italian and can take apart a car engine. I'm going to take a breath. I am honored to know you. When I hear a review of the things that you've done, I shake my head. And even the things that you don't talk about this stuff all the time, you just do it. And that's just who you are. So thank you for being such a curious learner, a person who wants to share what you know, uplift others, elevate the conversation, which is something that we try to do. And that speaks that when we're there, we're doing it all the time. But in the meantime, we'll have bright spots like you to listen to and to be a part of. So thank you for taking time out of your day and letting me gush for just a few moments. And know that before I get into a question, I do want you guys listening to know the quality of being unhurried is undervalued. Unhurried, constant, and by constant, I mean you can feel the range of emotions, but you show up where you are and being present. And I'll finish that with Regina and I walked through a very volatile time in business, and we had a chance to be with each other and near each other. And I can say this about you, Regina, that one of my takeaways as the time has moved forward is that regardless of what the situation is, you're you. And that is a quality that I find kind of rare. And I try to be that way. I look to live my life in a way, because the bottom line with that is when we show up who we are in doesn't mean we're even keel the whole time. You have your range of emotions, but what it does is it creates a sense of safety so that anybody that's around you feels safe and grounded to be who they are. What a gift.
The gift is really an introduction like that, Donna and Claire. It's a real privilege to be here for episode 50, to be looped into your brilliant, loving, open, curious conversations is an honor, and to be seen in such a way and championed for, celebrated in such a way is actually really moving. And thank you for the intro and for having me.
Wow. Super cool. All right. So you guys that need to rewind that and listen to it again for inspiration, you'll do that at another time. But as we dig into, what does that all mean for now? And we talked a little bit pre-show about the questions could go any direction here. And that's the fun part of bringing on really cool people, is that it's not like we can only talk about this because this is what it is. But one of the things that I'm super interested, and I wonder if it'll be helpful for our listeners too, Joyful Rebel means that you can be wherever you're at, but there is this sense of joy and lightness even in strife. So if you don't mind, I'm going to jump to that shadow side a little bit. And, I know that you have been faced with many moments of adversity and challenge, and big ones. And like so many of us have, but I know what yours are, and they have been. But you've rebounded with such a resiliency that it's made a real lasting impression. And I'm wondering, have you learned anything from that loop of adversity, resiliency, like anything that you can share with us that might shed some light if somebody's going through something right now?
That's resiliency is an incredible topic. It's like a big, I think, buzzword today in psychology, leadership, performance, athletic performance. Like it's a big word, it's a big topic. And when I saw this as a test question, like how I define resiliency or how I express it or define it in myself, it's really interesting to talk about, because I don't know that I've ever felt resilient. Okay, come with me on this. But I've also never had or felt an option to just keep going. So part of resiliency is the ability to spring back, or the ability to continue on, or the ability to come back. And some of us might just be wired to not stop, like just don't stop. And it's not with thought or celebration. Okay. And I have my own demons. They might be coded into the like female embodiment, or they might just be part human, a combination of the two, where really often I struggle with never feeling like I've done enough or am doing enough. I ruminate a lot. I realize more and more over time, I ruminate more and more. I'm not as pliable. I don't spring back as fast as I want to. And yet still, I just got to keep going. Like there's forward is it. Blinders on, head down, one foot in front of the other has been like my mantra for a really long time. Now that's in the face of, Donna and we worked together at a company where I really got to express my skills and strengths and passions all in one, in a high level leadership role that I thought influenced a lot for good. And when I left, I wasn't quite ready to leave, but the universe was ready for me to leave. And it was ugly. And I wasn't prepared to leave yet, but it was inevitable. And it took me a long time to recover from that emotionally. But the actions of just get up, head down, blinders on, take a step, that's what led to Gritty Buddha and creating this amazing yoga studio, yoga and meditation, global arm of retreats and education, like something I was super proud of for a long time until COVID. Okay,
Yeah.
so COVID, business in New York, fitness, wellness business in New York, disagreement with my landlord over time about how to navigate the situation, finally realized that the stress might kill me, and closed down this amazing business that was a full expression of what I believe the world and communities can like come together through. And so boom, I'm on my ass again. And still, even though it took me a long time to recover from the wisest business decision I ever made, but also the most painful, to close this business, there was no option other than to like get up, head down, blinders on, one foot in front of the other. So I say all this because I don't know that I've ever seen these things as resilient, but if I look back and give myself a little bit of credit for like getting up and just doing something and moving forward, then one could define it as being resilient. But I think part of the key, I don't care if it's you crawl, you slide, you claw, you sprint, you run, just in some way, get up, move forward, just take a step in any direction and things will change and you'll end up in new destinations. And that's like been some of the learning along the way, even if I don't give myself credit or define myself necessarily as resilient.
Huh.
I really like that. I think we talk a lot about this idea of feeling stuck and you're not moving forward and you're doing nothing and how that feels. And so I think, and we talk about one of the, not necessarily remedies, but one of the paths forward is, know yourself and know what you want and so that you can make these decisions about moving forward. And I think it's interesting. One of the things that you said is, being a part of you is that, you're just going to keep moving forward. You're not going to stop. And so even having trust in that, and maybe you didn't know the next step, and maybe leaving didn't feel good, but you knew you were going to have that forward momentum. And I think that's something that a lot of us could benefit from hearing. and from looking at our own lives and seeing, are we stalled somewhere? And, you know, that famous quote of, you don't need to know, you know, the whole stairway, you just need to take the first step. And I'm sure I butchered that. But I think that that's inspiring to know that, well, you're just taking those steps forward because the other option wasn't even an option, you're saying, right? You were just going to move forward anyways. And it's interesting to hear you talking about your businesses. I know my mom, you know, was involved in the yoga trainings that you've done. You're really passionate about that. So I'm curious, you know, for businesses, that's incredible. I wonder, and I know that some of them involve yoga, some of them involve coffee. I wonder if you wanted to just speak briefly about maybe what your businesses are, and I'm curious to know if there was maybe a surprising challenge that you faced that was similar amongst them, or something that stood out, maybe for any listeners who are curious about starting off and doing something on their own like that, just to be able to hear from someone who's, you know, been through it multiple times.
Yeah. All right. So the brief overview, powered by Regina, I started in my 20s. It was a athlete development and human performance company. So I used to be contracted to athletes to do all of their mental and physical coaching. That's what brought me around the world multiple times over um, through my 20s. So powered by Regina was all about, it was that. It was all about like giving the mechanisms and the engine to help athletes perform both physical and mental. And then I went into corporate leadership. So did a couple years running this business, contracting athletes, traveling the world, super amazing, super proud of it. I probably don't sit and think about it enough because it's so far in my past. Not by chronological years in my past, but by like exponential life experience years far in my past. Then I go to Lululemon. I'm there for a while. I go back to Powered by Regina, and then I end up somehow at Lifetime and spend a lot of years devoted to shifting their yoga programming to have more of a voice within the company and more of a path for leadership and progression. And what's interesting is I've always felt like an entrepreneur, even in like corporate roles, because I couldn't, unless I was given like some trust, autonomy, and a voice, I probably wouldn't stay in a box, in a square. It's just, so if I'm given autonomy, if I'm given enough trust, enough safety rope to fail a little bit, to try new things, and to ultimately move forward towards a bigger vision, then I can be an entrepreneur on my own, or I can apply it within a company. So then I leave and start Gritty Buddha. So like I said, yoga, meditation, conscious community. It's a site for education, both yoga philosophy, but also how that transcends into day-to-day living, interactions, and your professional life. And then we had this really awesome global retreat arm that took those conversations, condensed them, and densened them, right? So like compact, but also syrupy, like really, how do we dig into this so then you have something to take home into your life that hopefully makes your day-to-day interactions more positive. Then surprisingly founded Karmic Grind with a business partner who was a student at Gritty Buddha and has become a friend. Karmic Grind is coffee, art, and community. So it's a bustling coffee shop, gallery walls. We partner with an art dealer. We've got art on the walls. They move on and off the walls at her discretion, and also as they sell week after week after week. And it's another expression of bringing people together, right? Like a yoga studio, or what you think of in yoga studios is just people coming together to sweat, move, breathe. Coffee's so similar, so different, so similar though, in that, you know, you come to know one another, whether it's our team knowing our day-to-day guests, or the guests who come at each time slot knowing one another, and all of a sudden your lives are woven together inextricably. And then after closing Gritty Buddha, you know, I remember the week I was closing, I'd finally made this public announcement. I was devastated. Our community was devastated. It was 1 year into COVID restrictions in New York. And it was still another year from COVID restrictions really lifting in New York, especially in the industry. And I had all these people, they were giving me words of encouragement. And at the time, I didn't want to hear any words of encouragement. But when you're sort of a public community figure, you feel like you have to receive them, even though you want to be like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. Like, you don't understand, you can't possibly understand what it's like to lose or close a business, the financial, like all I had in my head was all of these nasty rebuttals and comebacks to every beautiful, loving, encouraging word. But I didn't express those. I just said thank you and nodded my head and like really knew that it was at its core, it was meant for good. I just felt so misunderstood in this moment. But I say all this because I had all these people tell me, I can't wait for version 2.0. Regina, I can't wait to see what you do next. I can't wait. I can't wait what level 2.0 is. And at the time, again, I'm completely dry of inspiration and creativity. I'm sick on the inside from the stress. I, sidebar during COVID in New York, also had Karmic Grind, had a 1.5-year-old and a kindergartner, and my dad living with us. Like, it was not the best ingredients for the most delicious cake you were ever going to make. Okay. It was like, and then after a couple days, I remember this lightning strike 2.0, level 2.0, version 2.0, 2.0. Okay. And I incorporated 2.0, thinking it would just be education. Like everything that I've written as curriculum and delivered could live in this house of level up, like level 2.0. And it did for a while until a dear friend of mine said, hey, we like need a space back in our hometown. And I was approached by another studio owner who was struggling. And I didn't want to buy a studio. I thought I'd never get back into like expressing these principles in this way. And then I also said, yeah, like she was like, we need a space and I'll take on this studio if you'll do it with me. And so 2.0 became also a physical yoga studio space, in addition to being this, education arm of growth and everything I've learned along the way. So those are the 4 companies over all this time that have been launched, that have risen, that have fallen, that continue to grow and thrive and are evolving as we speak.
Woo. So thank you for eloquently taking us on that ride there, because you can feel the ups and the downs, and who hasn't been there to some extent in our own version of, I didn't have the bandwidth, I didn't want to hear that, like just being in a situation. And a couple of things that came to mind is that when you're a leader, you're a leader. It doesn't matter what your role is, and there is a certain amount of ownership of understanding where that is. And there's the consistency again. Didn't feel like it. People are coming at you. You weren't fake, but you were able to provide a sense of safety. Hopefully it wasn't too big of a cost because you weren't like indulging everybody's comments, but you're acknowledging them. So there's that balance and consistency again as a leader, which again, when it's in your DNA, it's in your DNA. But to express it in those different ways, I like how you say that. One other thing that really strikes me and makes an impression is that here again, where we are in our narrative, I love it. It's a game now. Whenever I find myself in a situation and it's like, here's my situation. And now it's like, pull it back. It's like, this is where I'm at in this part of it. It doesn't mean it's over yet. And I find that my life is so much better when I understand that where I am in the story is not the end necessarily. And most often it's not. And that just provides hope all over the place. And I don't even know what it's going to turn out, but it won't be this. And there's some resolution, or there's time to soften whatever happened that allows, when people say like, it's really going to be okay in the end. I do believe that to some extent, things will be okay in the end, because maybe even the situation didn't change, but this changed in here. And now I interpret it a little bit differently. I see the lessons. That there's distance between the hurt and the
Yeah.
lessons and the data point of it. I can be more of an observer, and it doesn't mean any of that didn't happen, but it's just a different lens. And boy, I love walking through life having different lenses,
Yeah.
because when I only have one pair of specs, I am in deep doo-doo. I just, it's too myopic, quite literally, but it's also that hope is gone. And when that evaporates for me, I make different choices and I operate. That's when it's harder for me to get the movement to put one foot in front of the other. Like when I know that the story isn't done yet, or I don't even know how it's going to turn out. I have no idea, but all I got to do is put one foot, get some movement going, and at least I'll be in a different place. And I am humbled by that as a concept and a life. And it almost makes the challenges sit in a different place in my heart, because I know that they're like, it's not dismantling all of my core. It's just busting up this little chunk over here. And
Yeah.
that's okay, because I've got extra, if that
Yeah.
makes any sense.
The concept of distance translating to perspective is really powerful. And I think something I've learned, especially in the last few years, is distance to perspective, it can be exponential. It's not like every day you're further away from a situation. It's not necessarily more time. Sometimes it is just more time. Just you got to give things time. Sometimes it's breath, sometimes it's space, sometimes it's geography. So when I look back, just as an example, we closed what was Gritty Buddha mid-COVID. Super wise decision as a business owner. Like if you're looking at numbers and you're looking at projections and you're trying to plan ahead in a time that's so uncertain, you have no idea. All these numbers that weigh on your algorithm are completely out of your control in this moment, or relatively out of your control. It was a super wise decision. Wise and painful overlapped 100% in that moment, right? Super painful, like so painful, gut wrenching. Closing the studio, we realized we don't have to be in New York full time. And we relocated down to Jupiter, Florida. The healthiest move ever for our family, the healthiest move for our daughters, the healthiest. I've found myself practicing in other studios down here. And when I ruminate and I think of like what went down at that period of time, and even though I want to like throw my middle fingers up at the whole situation and my landlord and blah, 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 ultimately I still cycle back to thank you so much. Oh my God, thank you so much. If not for that situation, it wouldn't have freed us up to make this move. My daughters and my husband wouldn't be the healthiest they've ever been, the happiest they've ever been. We've spent more time together as a family in the last 2 years than I did with a newborn, traveling the world, like literally traveling all over North America, slinging a newborn with me so I could go do my work in the world that I loved. I would just bring her all over the country, starting at like 3 months old. So ultimately, it's thank you. Like it might be a big F you on the way, but that distance that creates perspective, sometimes it's time, sometimes it's geography, sometimes it's a breath, sometimes it's a new perspective from a friend who lifts you up. And if you can not be so stuck in your reactions in those moments, Donna, like you said, and just this is happening right now, but this is not me, this is not who I am, this is not the final, this is not that, then we can come back to a just more generous place of receiving or seeing all those winks that the universe or God might send to us, or appreciating when we're rerouted instead of thinking that it's the last detour we're ever going to take. It's not.
Hmm. Last detour. Sounds so ominous, but it's true. Haven't you ever done that where you're like, oh, this is it. Like, I'm just going to sit with this today. And, like, I don't even know what it's even going to look like. But I mean, what's coming to me is that part of resiliency is a spark of creativity. Like, there's something about the forward movement, but there's also just that, like you said, it opens up the possibility of something That's closed, but all of this is open now. And when we can turn our head just a little bit, or our mind's eye, there's really these limitless opportunities if we look at it, if we're intentional. And I love the intentionality about that. And I loved it when you guys were like, we're packing up, we're going to Florida. It's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah. It came out of left field. And it's also, like I said, it's been such a gift in so many ways, and a gift we never would have gotten to unwrap if not for that really difficult, really painful, sad situation. So, Claire, you asked about like a common lesson or a common challenge between all of them. And that the one thing that I'm still learning is that when your work is such an expression of who you are and what you hope for in the world and your values and what you believe is good for others, it's hard to separate yourself from your business. It's hard to not take personally when someone doesn't participate or when something shuts down. It's hard to not feel it as your own personal loss, or it's hard to, I find it very difficult to extract myself, like physically, mentally, emotionally, myself, who I am from the work that I'm putting out in the world and the businesses that form around who I am and what I hope for. So that's been a common lesson through all of these corporate and entrepreneurial, small business, global business, doesn't matter. I'm still learning how to not make, like, that's not me. It's an expression of me. It's what I believe, but it is not me. It's not always personal. It's not, and that is proving to be a repeating lesson and a big challenge.
Hmm. Oh, isn't it like a superpower though? I mean, if I went to hear you say that, it's like that's your thing to manage. You just got to manage that because it works. It works really well. That's part of your fuel, but then you also have to manage the downside is that it can be hard to parse out.
Yeah.
And keep that as separate, which would be tidier. It'd be so much tidier.
Oh
And
yeah.
sometimes I want that. I just want me, just like that. But I love that, if that is one of your superpowers, what a great one to have.
That's a good shift of perspective for me. I'm going to take that one to the bank.
I'm running away now.
Yes. Mic drop.
Well, I think as we're talking, one thing I really want to is we're in the present time too. What would you say? This could be anywhere you want it to go. Like, what is really lighting you up right now? Is there something in this season where you're like, okay, I know things are a little bit different. We're settled. We've got whatever's happening in your world. Do things bubble up for you like per season where it's like, ooh, I'm looking at this right now because that's the thing that's helping me stay engaged and connected. Does it anything like that, or does it feel separate?
Hmm. That's a great question. I, one thing that constantly lights me up, like again and again and again, and I know when I need a hit, is travel. I take a ton of lessons. I just reap a ton of lessons. I can be an observer. I can assimilate. I love sharing the world with our girls. And so we just spent the month of June in Italy. And I worked in Italy through my 20s. I had multiple work contracts in Italy. So I was very lucky that I lived the life. I lived the lifestyle. I was paid. I was like there for work. It wasn't a backpacking trip. It wasn't a semester abroad. Both amazing in their own right. I just was introduced to the like heart of the culture very young by like really living and working there. And I happen to love it a lot. And every year I've asked my husband, like, can we attempt a little more time there? I want to work on the language. I want the girls to hear the language. I want to walk stairs in the sun from sun up to sundown. Like I reap a lot of perspective and space and creativity from those moments. So we were just there for the month of June, and we lived and we worked. We stayed plugged into our responsibilities here. We had the girls on a sort of a tag team schedule. We did our best to not be solely tourists. And I'm still working out all the lessons from this time, and looking ahead to like, so what is the next experience that I can learn from and then share. So that's one thing, like it's a constant in my life since I got my first passport at 18 and went overseas for the first time at 18. We weren't a traveling family when I was growing up. We'd drive to Colorado to see my grandparents. That was most of our travel in my youth. And then as soon as I had that passport in my hand, I was like, oh, game
Game
over.
on.
Like, I'm never coming back. I really thought for a while I was never coming back. But yeah, so that's one thing that I can turn to very reliably for new ways of thinking, being, seeing the world. Somehow I get a ton of time to study and research when we travel. It's like I bend time when we travel. So that's one thing that really, really I plug into the best of me when we're on the road. So that's super helpful. Yeah, that's the thing right now. That's like really, I'm still sitting on this experience of a full month there, and I'm still picking it apart. And also without trying to accelerate through my lessons or like be like, yay, that was great. What's next?
Right.
I am also still thinking, so what's next? And yeah, that's one way I light myself up.
So it sounds like it's like their experience or the thing that you do that helps stoke your fire, but it's got a precursor and it's got an afterburn that sometimes I don't tend to pay attention to the before and the after, because all of it makes up the experience, whatever it is. And I think that like getting a new tattoo, stay with me. So getting a new tattoo means you're going, you're doing this thing, right, Claire? But you think about it beforehand because you're picking out the design and you're getting all excited about it. And so like there's phases of it. And I don't want myself to miss that. There are phases of the experience that we can have that make it so it's not volume and quantity, but it's dialed into what does this mean? And can I sort through and sift through all of it and just get every little last bit out of it, and then I can move on. So it's not about just acquiring and amassing, it's tempo. And the tempo for me is really important. That's what I'm hearing too.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier too, Mom, that you notice as one of Regina's great traits is being unhurried and being able to, yeah, you're getting stuff done, but in the moment you're kind of enjoying what's happening and you're not taking that for granted and just on to the next. So you've got that combination of you're going to keep moving forward, but you're going to appreciate each moment as it's happening. And I think that's a pretty magical combination right there. It kind of reminds me of, what we strive for, what I teach a lot about when we're trying to take our yoga off the mat. And so this leads me to my last question, and that I've done my 200-hour yoga training and I'm currently in a 300-hour training. And so it's just really top of mind, a lot of yoga on the brain. But you had mentioned with Gritty Buddha and then with 2.0 that it's a lot of education and yoga philosophy, but also how you can take that off your mat and how that shows up for people in real life. And so I'm curious, one, maybe if you've got anything that's been inspiring your teaching lately, like what's been some inspiration for you? And also if someone who is, new to yoga, or maybe doesn't have what they would say, quote unquote, is a strong practice, or has been in yoga and is out of it, what would you say in a nutshell are like some benefits that you just witnessed so many people having that could be motivation to get on your mat, try it out, get into it again?
Oh my God, this is such a good question, and so like relevant and meaningful potentially for the whole world and all of humanity. But I mean, as my very Italian dad would say, what do I know? So what I love about this question, this topic is so many people, the barrier to entry for yoga can feel so high. And I've taught now for 21 years. I've practiced for 22. I was like an old school, like young kid in this yoga studios before there were cool branded studios on every corner. Just like finally I was tapped on the shoulder to just, hey, a teacher can't be here. Can you share what you know? And you're like, I can't share anything. I don't know anything, but share what you know right now. And so I've been flexing this muscle for a long time. Sometimes I feel like an old piece of luggage, like dusty in a corner. I've done this for so long. I'm so lucky that the practice was introduced to me at 18 and I've never put it down. Like I've never put it down. A couple years in, I realized I don't want to know myself without this because it's ugly. Like it's high temper, hot temper, negative self-talk. Like let's just keep managing who you are with the aid of this practice. And over all these years, like you hear the same rebuttals. Everyone thinks they're so unique and they're so different, and they're the only ones who feel inflexible. Okay, you feel inflexible? And I'm like, Gumby? No, inflexible in the mind, inflexible in the spirit, inflexible in your hamstrings. I don't care. That's universal. People are like, well, I'm not good. I'm like, me neither. It still feels sometimes so not good. And I feel like I look like a fool. And then I have to remember that no one else is focused on me at all because they're all feeling the same way on the inside. And I don't know the language and I don't know the words. And like, yeah, me neither, but I do know head, shoulders, knees and toes, knees and toes. Like what do you mean you don't know your body and your body parts? We're disconnected from them, but we know. And over time, if we fill it in with some language, phenomenal. We learn another language on the way, just like we did in an anatomy classes, just like we did if we took language classes, just we fill it in. But I'm going to like circle back to where we began and just show up, get up, one foot in front of the other, just attempt, because I see so many students over time who struggle with feeling like they don't know anything at all and like they're supposed to know everything in the first minute that they ever hit a yoga mat. Mm-hmm. And all of it is discovery, and all of it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of willingness to learn along the way. And when did we stop celebrating the learning process and start expecting us to always show up to everything new, looking like we're perfectly put together and we know 5,000 years of history in 5 minutes of our first yoga class or our first yoga class ever or our first yoga class back on the mat? Like, come on. So I've stopped preaching the benefits. It's like spackle, whatever the hole is that you feel you might have the ability to spackle it in through these practices, a clearer mind, better recovery from life's agitating situations. So that leads to better stress management, that leads to more effective systems. Like we could go on and on. But ultimately, until we can encourage and celebrate the learning process, the process of growing, adapting, changing, figuring things out, until we can disarm people's egos, or until each of us can disarm our own ego enough to be like, you know what, this is how I'm showing up today. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to be in over my head. I'm not going to know this thing, but I'll remember this thing. And all for my net growth, like all of this towards my net gain as a human. Like we could list any number of benefits and it's not going to be heard, or it's not going to be enough to push someone past their ego. But if we cheer for the process of learning and growing and figuring things out, then I hope our student base will broaden And that's where I think this is like actually a humanity question, much more than it's a teaching yoga on the mat question, right? Because I wouldn't have the perspective I have in even the most difficult situations I've been faced with if I didn't know how to like take a breath, take a pause, zoom out a little bit, even in the moment, and not be the hot-headed, fiery tempered, reactive bulldog half Sicilian that I actually am. Like I can be all of that and not fight people. Right?
Mm.
But thank God, like I celebrate learning and figuring things out, and I don't mind looking and feeling awkward along the way. And I wish that for everyone. Like I wish that for everyone, because we would all open ourselves up to so much more if we could just be a little awkward and go back to square one.
Wow, that's very powerful. And that last part you said, I know pre-show you mentioned you have a fourth grader. I have a fourth grade daughter too. And I feel like that's one of the lessons I'm telling her right now, right? Because I remember those fourth grade years and just it's okay. It's okay if things feel awkward. And, again, dealing with ego and disarming it and all that and just being excited to learn. So I see that a lot when we do these shows and different episodes of how it shows up in my parenting. And then I reflect back on how it's in my life and with my teaching. So I think it's cool how these kind of threads weave in and out of all these different aspects of our life. So thank you for that perspective on it. I do agree that celebrating the learning process is kind of where the energy needs to be.
Yeah. So I love that you brought up our fourth graders. Fourth grade is awesome. I wouldn't go back. I don't need to go back to fourth grade, but it was awesome as it was. But my husband and I were really concerned about our daughter last year. She had a long learning curve to figure out her math. And the last thing I want is her going into another grade feeling behind. And we just couldn't figure it out. Because it wasn't an issue for either of us. So we lack a little bit of the empathy to like actually help her. We're also not educators, like we're not child educators. Those are a different level of angel walking this earth. So we spent a long year being a little hard on her and a little hard on ourselves and feeling really bad that she might be behind. Did we practice any math this summer? Nope, not a thing, except if you like have to make change in euros, and because she was so fascinated with like 2 euro coins. That's about the extent of our math. She came back and she did her assessment yesterday or the day before, her math assessment to see where she's placing. And she is above grade level. And it's like all of it just integrated. All of it. It needed enough time, enough to figure it out, enough saturation to like just hear it, try it again and again and again and again, enough space to let it figure itself out and for her to grow into. And then boom, sight unseen, first week of school, first week of fourth grade. She tests at a higher level that she ever tested last year without any practice. Does that happen for all of us and everything? No. But does it happen? Does the body learn when we're not actively figuring things out? Does the body and mind remember? Do we need to give things time? Yes, yes, and yes. And they're just brilliant little examples and reminders of like what we could be paying attention to and encouraging that might do the world a whole lot more good.
Wow. It's like life is not a performance. It is a partnership and an experiment and the trial and error and the showing up and when I make it a performance and I fall flat. It's not it. And I love the hope in all that. And when we give oxygen to the things that we think are important, that might even seem counterintuitive, and we just keep trying and learning. And that whole process lights me up too. And I want to keep being that way and to keep staying in that space. So I feel energized to hear how it shows up for you and your family, Regina. It's really cool. I love learning from you, Claire, and seeing how it shows up in you and the kids, and to see it firsthand. And all of this is such a gift, even when it feels really muddy and messy and hurtful and all of it. It's just, it's such a gift. I'm humbled. I'm humbled to be here. I've really enjoyed being able to have a conversation with a couple of my favorite people on the planet. And, I don't know, Claire, you got anything to wrap us up, or Regina? Like, I don't really want to leave, but I'm guessing that we're gonna have to have a Joyful Rebels podcast 2.0. Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
I like it.
Um, Also, thank you so much, Regina. This was a lot of fun. I feel like I got a lot of interesting perspective on the things that you shared, and I know our listeners are going to benefit as well. So I mean, that's why we're doing this thing. And then I just get the benefit, of meeting cool people along the way.
Me too.
Um, and hello, episode 50. Could not have asked for a better way for this one to go down. So for those of you listening, thank you so much for coming along with us along this journey, almost at that year anniversary, and we're going to keep on going. So we hope you stay on the journey with us. Until next time, Rebels.